Hello and welcome to our latest coffee clip. Today we're going to be looking at how we can use headings in Squarespace and make sure that we're using best practice when we add our heading styles and we position them accordingly. So as a good starting point, at the top of each page we generally have a heading 1. So this is what we call the HTML code, and the HTML code then in these angular brackets is displaying what's going to appear between the start, the opening and the closing of the heading. This / basically means cancel that command. So the good news is, if you're new to web design and Squarespace in particular, you don't have to worry about learning to write out heading tags or write out HTML. But it is really handy to understand how it works behind the scenes so you can apply it to best practice. Again, on top of that, more good news is that the Squarespace style editor will allow you to edit your heading 1s or H1s to get the right type of look and feel that you want, and you can do that all visually without needing to know a line of code. So when we start a page, we generally use a heading 1. A heading 1 is used once throughout the entirety of each page. It's also what Google sees as one of the most important areas to put your keywords. So make sure that obviously you don't want to have just title in as your heading 1. You want to have it relevant to the content of the page, and also you want to be second guessing what people are going to type into search engines to find said page. So then when we move on to other heading styles and start building out the page content, we can now have a look at some of the other options. So before I put another heading in, I might want to put a paragraph, which can be as little as 1 sentence or as much as 5 or 6 sentences. Any more than that, you're generally adding a new paragraph for it. That's generally what's seen as good practice to get nice consistent paragraph lengths. So then we put our paragraph content in, and then we cancel or close that paragraph. So then we have what I would say is the most conventional page structure in there. But when we're trying to create content, especially when we're trying to create engaging content that's also taking search engines into account, that's not really enough. Google sees this page and says there's not enough information to answer the questions that my visitors are going to be asking, so I'm going to prioritize another website that has a lot more detail and a lot more relevant, important information for my viewers. So Google doesn't care about you, Google cares about the users. So therefore, if you present your content neat and tidy and with enough relevance and enough information for Google, everything else falls into place. So what we might tend to do is to put in subheadings in our page. And this is where we'd put in a heading 2. And you've probably seen it already, but in the Squarespace editor, you've got a drop-down selector. So you highlight over the text and then you choose heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. So again, just to reiterate, you don't have to understand what these are from a practical perspective to create your own code for it, but understanding that how they tie together and how they work really generally helps to give you a kind of a broad, clear understanding of how it all fits together. One of the important things to consider when we're using heading tags is the way that they cascade. So you may have heard the term CSS. Well, CSS is short for cascading style sheets. And the reason for that is that we've got a heading 1 which sits out here, then we've got a paragraph. And then a heading 2 can be used multiple times per page, but you would always have the heading 1 first. And then where it gets slightly more tricky is where we have a heading 3. So generally what we'd have is a heading 3 would be nested in further, or cascading in, so we might then have 2 heading 3s before we go back to our heading 2. So if you've got a page with a lot of content, and a good example would be a detailed page on Wikipedia, they will have maybe up to heading 4 or 5, where they're cascading in a lot, but we're nesting in the headings within inside each other. What we shouldn't be doing is mixing them up. That's not what's seen as best practice in web design. So what we shouldn't have is a heading 1 and then we scrap the paragraph and then put a heading 3 here instead, because we're losing the order. So when someone's using this, a screen reader or a braille reader, or when a search engine is looking at the content, it doesn't know how to properly organize it because you've jumbled up the format. So that's what I would always say is it's good best practice. A couple of little things I've done from time to time is I might put a heading 2 as the first line or first sentence of the page. Be careful not to put too much content in here, because again, headings are designed to be short, snappy key messages which have our keywords in there. The more keywords you cram into a really long heading, it'll just dilute the importance of those keywords. So it's always a case of being ruthless with your prioritization of your content and making sure that our title and if we do a subtitle for heading 2, just to ease people into the page with that nice impact, that we go short to the point and we focus on 1 or 2 keywords at a time. Remember that you can target multiple keywords or phrases on any page. So if you've got one page which is selling shoes, then obviously you would have keywords in and around shoes, whether it's including color in the keyword. So brown leather shoes would be an example of it, or whether you bring in the brand, then that's absolutely fine. But then if you're selling shirts on another page, your keywords will change on a page by page basis. You may then have keywords that override them. So this is how we can then take those keywords and format them on our Squarespace site and just understand a little bit of the background of what's going on.